Yeah, it's more than 50 companies that say they're unique in a season, but there we go. Good morning, everyone. Corporate governance. It's one of those terms that when I took this job at Legal & General about 5 years ago, people said, oh, you're not being a fund manager anymore, you poor thing, or something like that. They didn't really understand what it is. And I think, as we've seen in the last 5 years, corporate governance has become such a bigger area. But it's not an area that should be different to any other area. It should be part of your business. So when I talk to most of the fund managers, I know most of the smaller cap fund managers, some of them are going to be here this afternoon and this morning, they look at governance all the time. They just don't call it that. They call it things like trust, integrity, tone at the top. Have they got the right skills to do the job? Do we trust them to do things? Have they got the skills? It's all of those things, and that's what corporate governance really is, because in the end of the day, we don't want just box ticking. And I think, we've, investors, got to put a hand up. We used to do a lot of box ticking as well, and so we're not perfect in this, but we also got to encourage companies, and that's why I'm delighted to be here. I do think it's quite important to say corporate governance, what it is. Well, first of all, my clients, and there's a lot of them at Legal & General, they do own the companies that they invest in. They do own them, and they don't always feel that they're being owned or aligned in the same way. And we do want that, and we are long-term investors, and I think that's very important that people understand that. And I think the directors, linking them to their owners is a really good skill, and I think it's very important. So let's start with the most important message that I'm going to make. Every company that does this well, and we meet many of them, and it comes from the chairman at the top, and it comes from the company secretaries, and it comes from the directors, who does it well, normally gets a higher rating, has a lower cost of capital, is trusted to make more M&A, he's given investments, he's allowed to do these things. Surely that's what you want. So therefore, it's about money. This is not corporate governance to put it in a box and just tick it and then get on the main market or wherever you are and then hide it in the corner. We can see the difference between it doing well and not doing so well. And we can tell the spirit that there are hundreds of things that you could do, but you don't have to do them all. You really don't. You have to do what's best for your company. And we don't mind if you don't do 15 things that you think that you don't need to do. Explain why. We're very happy for that, because you should be doing what's best for your long-term future. But some things are pretty obvious, and I'll go through some of them. But you want to inspire trust in your investors. Really important. We have a choice of things to buy, and there is a lot of things out there. And therefore, you want to be the one that's chosen. You want to get the buy. You want people to believe you. You want people, when things aren't going well, to give you the benefit of the doubt. And they're more likely to do that if you're trying very hard and showing that over a period of time. Two quick examples. When we see appointments of non-exec directors, and I'm talking not for Legal & General, I talk to many other fund managers, and I'm going to go through that in a minute. We know when a company goes, hang on, why have they chosen that person? He's been involved in 3 failures. He's got too many companies to do. It's normally a he, but that's a different debate. And again, that person is not going to add any value. They've just picked it because it ticks a box. They'll probably not challenge too much. We are not happy with that. Do better than that. There's some great people out there, great people who want to be non-exec directors. And I think it's really important when we see the difference between that. Disclosure. Yes, we can read an annual report, and we do, and my credit team, my equity team, they read the annual report. The poor disclosure that we see sometimes, I've got many examples, I've even got some reports, but we did a board review and we function effectively. Well, thanks for that. That all you're saying? And there's nothing you can do better? You are absolutely perfect? Well, I don't think so. I don't think many people are perfect. So we don't want it like that. And my portfolio managers and the ones that I talk to are other investors, they can tell when these ones are trying or when they're just trying to do the minimum. And therefore, when things get tough, and sadly, I know we got slightly positive on there, but when things are tough and maybe your markets aren't as good as you want, or you have to have downgrades or anything else, you're more likely to get benefit of the doubt from the ones who you've tried to explain it to and show that what you're doing. Life doesn't always work well. We know that. We do understand that. So we do want you to get people like non-execs who can challenge, who actually can add value to your business. Get someone that you think is going to be useful for the next 5 years. Don't get someone that was any good 10 years ago that might have no use for your future. Get your non-execs to come and meet the shareholders, not just the executive teams. They might want to know what's going on. They might want to have a little bit of feedback of what the shareholders think. And company secretaries, I think that's a really key role. It's obviously different in certain size companies, but you should have someone, whether it's an executive or a company secretary separate, who can actually help, who can talk to people like me and my opposite numbers at other firms, so that you can get the antennae, you can see what are the big issues that might be a problem. What does it mean about climate change or diversity or tax or all of these cybersecurity? What do I have to do? Get someone to help you. And if you do this early, you'll be in a much better position than other people. Employees. The amount of times I get the annual report saying, our employees are our most important asset. And where? Training, R&D, churn, whistleblowing. Tell me, show me. How do you do that? Obviously in your companies, if you lose people, that's a real key. So what plans have you put in place? Talk to us about it. All of these things, that's governance to me. And one of the things that I'd say as well is, I don't think you may know this, you may not. I am involved in the Corporate Governance Forum and the 25 largest asset managers. We speak every week in the busy period, and we speak every month in the quieter time. And we bring up companies that we've got issues with. We've got one tomorrow. And there are certain companies on there that aren't on the radar at the moment. That someone at maybe Schroders or Threadneedle or Standard Life might bring it up. We go, oh, I haven't looked at that. And then we bring up our ones. So it's getting out there now. And you've seen some of the big high-profile votes against. Nobody wants that. Shareholders don't really want that. We don't want to vote against. We'd rather the company was doing what we want it to do for its shareholders. But we do talk to each other, and I think that's really important that you know that. I still get, very rarely now, because they know me quite well, most of the companies, but they still sometimes say, oh, you're the only one with that view. And I say, well, I've got 3 emails from other shareholders that don't say that that's the truth. And then how can we've been the only one and you got 59% vote against your pay? We didn't have 59% of the company, so others had that view. So the QCA Corporate Governance Code is a good starting point. And I think it really does help to show you. But use the bits you think are important. It's very important. One of the debates that I get, companies say, environmental stuff. Sacha, what should I focus on? I said, it's your company. What matters in your company environmentally? It's not just do 17 things that matter about polar bears or anything like that. How does it affect your company? It really is simple like that. So I don't answer their questions. I say, you tell us what you think is important. I do think that lower cost of capital is the main reason for doing this. It really does. I mean, we've got enough statistical analysis, and the CAS Business School did some work, and Harvard and all these people done it, that poor governance destroys value. So that's why we care about it, and that's why I've got a big team and we can do this, and we try to. And if you just think of it another way, if you're a portfolio manager, you've got a choice of 2 companies, and you've got one that's got good disclosure, has got a board that you trust, has got a couple of good skills on there, and you've got another one that's got the old renter Ned from the old days and doesn't talk about much in there. Which one are you going to buy? You've got choices. I think we want as well to make sure that companies don't have to do too much. We are conscious, and I think Tim mentioned about rules, regulations, red tape. That's why we're saying if you don't think that's important and explain why, don't do that. But please, there are certain things that you must have to do, like succession planning, things that are important to your company. And I think we can help. Investors are happy, not in the middle of the busy voting period, but we are happy to talk to our companies and go through it. And call company secretaries, the executives, the finance director, they can come and talk to us, say, we're thinking about doing this or that. What do you think? And we know lots of people that do it. And a good chairman, the tone at the top, that is, if you ask me one thing that I want, if I've got a good chairman who's doing things and really, really strives and has energy, they will make things happen. And that is really important. So, a couple of key things before I go. Good transparent disclosure, I've sort of touched on that. We can tell the difference. That annual report is important, you should use it. It's not a marketing document. It's what you've done and what you're going to do. Show both positives and negatives. We understand no one's perfect. What are your key risks for the future? You've just talked about that here. Why don't you talk about them in your annual report and how you're managing them? Be honest. Show us that you're aware. The amount of companies that talk about cybersecurity is 20%, but 80% talk about digital opportunities. You get the positives, but nothing on the negatives. Well, sadly, we've seen many companies, and we're going to see many more, fail on cyber. Now, the ones that at least mentioned it, we're going to give more the benefit of the doubt than the ones that didn't even mention it and didn't bring it up at a board meeting. They're the ones that are going to be in trouble. Skills of the board. Tell us about the skills. Tell us why that person is on the board. What do they bring? Not just their CV. Say, they've got consumer-facing skills. They are fantastic at looking after our employees. These people are good at property or whatever it is. Tell us, just a paragraph. Just give us something. And another thing that a lot of times happens is some of the companies hide when the times are bad. They don't want to come and see their shareholders in the bad time. They're always knocking on the door when their shares have doubled. Well, it's a journey, you know, that American stuff about a journey and we're working with you. But come and talk to us, because when things are bad, you need your investors. And let's be absolutely frank. The difference between doing this right and wrong might be the difference between losing your job on the board or being able to inspire trust and get it back. Many companies have lost their executive teams because people, investors, are not happy with what's going on. Therefore, you don't want to be one of those. You can stand out. I mean, we're not going to talk about Sports Direct today, but you can imagine that Sports Direct has had governance concerns for a few years. But even a billionaire has to turn up at the MP Select Committee eventually. And I think it was shown that, you know, there were things that need to be done. Now, we don't think the standards at Sports Direct have to be the standards of some of the highest FTSE 100, but there are minimum standards. Supply chain, not having child labour, things like that. We think are minimum standards that people should do and not just tick boxes. And by the way, the shares have halved in the last year. Money, it's about money. We do want you to have ambition. When you're ready, we do want you to move through the markets. We do think that premium listed market is a great market at the right time. We do like IM, we do like standard listing. We want you to have that ambition when you're ready, but that's how you want it. So to finish, I think it's really important. We don't use the word governance too much. It's all of the things that we've talked about, and I haven't mentioned so many other areas. It's not meant to hinder you. It should help you be a better company, and if you're growing or moving, if you have the controls in place or you have these skills in place, you can then grow and you can then get better investments and you will get better. Investors will buy you, you have a higher rating, you have a lower cost of capital. It will help, and it helps our value of our investments. That's why we do it. So I'm going to stop there and try and get it onto schedule, but I'm very happy to answer some questions on anything that you'd like. Thank you.
So, if you have a question, can you raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. And while you're thinking of a question, I'm sure our chairman's got one, just to put him on the spot. Can I just ask you, Sacha, are there any particular companies that you would see as role models? And if there are, you know, why? And you know, what are the skills or competencies that they're showing?
Well, I'm not going to embarrass companies too, but what I would say is it's not just the company, because it's not the sectors, it's the people. So we've met some fantastic chairmen, which I can give some names if you want, but they work at different companies in different sectors, and they are striving to do what they think is right for the companies all the time. And once we meet those people, we, with other investors, help them get other positions. We also know chairmen who have done, I will say, a reasonably poor job, that's being very polite, who we make sure do not get another job on many boards ever again. That's also important. But I think it's the people rather than the companies. Right. And I think the tone at the top, you know, we've seen about phone hacking, something like that. What's that got to do with governance? Well, it matters when the shares halve. Where did that come from? Is it the tone at the top? Is it the culture? We've seen at Tesco what happened in there, and the culture and the fear factor. Fear factor, that's what's more important. And as soon as things changed and a new person came in, everybody came and told them their war stories, and there were a few. So I think it's that more importantly than just specific companies.
Okay, thank you. And there's a question here at the front. Joss, if you could sprint, that would be great.
Don't trip.
Good morning. Malcolm Diamond, TriFast, and Flowtech, both small caps. Flowtech is AIM, and ACAL, which is small cap. Our biggest problem is trying to distinguish between what is, if you like, regulated or best practice for the larger companies, the medium size and the small. So we feel it's a one-size-fits-all, but is it really like that? That would help if you could explain, if you have a sort of a bit of a league separation system, so small market caps don't get tied up with so much regulation which keeps coming every year?
So the quick answer is, when a company lists on say the main market, we give them a period of grace because we understand that they're coming from a different place to, say, I don't know, a big company that's been doing this for 20 years. So totally understand that. If you're a very small company, we don't expect you to have 7 non-exec directors. We don't expect you to have functions and stuff like that. But what we do expect is that you can put in your report how you're doing succession planning, how you're doing key man risk. And you should just say, there are 3 things here that big companies do that we don't think are relevant for us. Just saying that gets you off it a lot of the time and shows you why you're doing other things. And of course the QCA Corporate Governance Code at the smaller end gives examples of how to do that and what bits. And then the other thing, if you're not sure, ring up 2 or 3 of your investors and say, we're thinking of doing that, but we don't think this is important, or on pay. We don't expect that part to be important. Well, then that's fine. We don't expect you to all have L-tips that are like Martin Sol's L-tips. That might not be a good starting point for your listing career. But that would be an example. And I think most investors would give you some steer to help you.
Brilliant, thank you. I didn't know Comply and Explain still had some
Absolutely.
validity.
I have many companies, everyone thinks there's this 9-year rule on being a non-executive director. There are many companies where there's someone there's 11, 12, 13, absolutely fine. If they need 1 or 2 people who've got corporate memory, and especially when things are going wrong and they need something like that, we have absolutely no problem. What we don't want is everyone on the board to have 13 years and no one being new and refreshed. But Comply Explain is alive and well.
Brilliant, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Edward.
Edward Beale from Citigroup. Small companies usually only tend to see their investors twice a year for results presentations. And you've made the point that the chairman has a very important role at companies. At these results presentations, in my experience, chairmen rarely attend. What should fund managers be doing to change that, or if anything?
Well, my personal view is I'm not so worried about the results presentations, but I think sometimes they should attend. I think the chairman of good companies, and we see this in small, tiny and big, not always, writes to their, or speaks to their shareholders, I'd like to come and see you, not at the results period, to tell you what I think about how we've done, but also, you're one of our top 10 shareholders, I'd like to know what you think of our company, and I'd rather hear it directly than through intermediaries. And that's what we get quite a lot. And that part of it, funny enough, they all want to do that 1 month before the AGM. I don't know why. But do that 6 months before the AGM. Or maybe have a group. We have some companies, and M&S is one that does this at the moment, and Rolls-Royce has done it from a position of weakness. But they invite their top 20 shareholders for a round table with the chairs of the committees, just to have a discussion for 2 hours about strategy, risk, audit, and employees, and then suddenly at the end about pay. But instead of just talking about pay, which again annoys investors, we don't, companies have got a lot of things going on, and I don't want to be knocked on the door by the chair of Remco just telling me we need to pay the CEOs unique. Fine, but can you tell me why you've performed the way you did, and can you tell me all the other things that are important? So that was how I would do it. So I would get them to invite the investors to speak to the chairman at regular intervals.
But we keep on hearing that investors are invested in lots of small companies and have limited amounts of time, and that they don't have the time available. So often these sorts of invitations to shareholders to talk to the chairman will be turned down because there's nothing in particular happening. So how do you square that circle?
I think I have this question a lot. The first thing I'd say is, some companies say, we wrote to our top 20 and only 4 replied. And I said, well, if you had a dinner party and you just sent someone an email, wouldn't you chase it up? Do you really want to see them? Or if you just sent it out and went, yeah, I'll tick the box, they haven't come back. Half of them have sent the email to my colleague Andy Banks, who retired last year. He's still getting the odd email and he's retired. It goes to Bucklesbury House. I never worked there, but Illegal and General were there 6 years ago. It's still got Bucklesbury House, and we get things. Show a bit more effort. Yes, of course, you won't always get that. But if you put a bit of effort and you go and talk to your top 5 and say, I'd like to meet you once a year, we get much more traction. I think you can. But again, back to spirit. Don't just send a letter out and then go, no one replied, so it's all right then. I think it has to be better than that.
But if the quality of the chairman is so important, shouldn't the investors be being more proactive as well as the chairman?
Absolutely. And if you look at what people, and I won't mention other asset managers, but I know them very well, they do bring the chairman in quite a lot. What normally happens is they bring them in when things are not so good. But you're already starting a relationship that isn't good if you've not met them before, and the only time you're meeting them is after 2 profit warnings. That is not normally the right time to be talking to your investors. If you'd built that relationship up, you'd probably get more benefit of the doubt.
Sacha, thank you very much indeed. Are you around for a little bit longer?
I am. I'm
So,
looking forward to the Brexit debate.
Excellent. So Sacha will be around for a while, so if you have any other questions, please collar him, and I'm sure he'll be very happy to answer them.